Well, it looks like Liz Truss is at it again. Yes, she is going after the anti-growth coalition, which, well, we still don't know what this anti-growth coalition is. All we know, it tended just to be a collection of people who, well, just disagreed with Liz Truss. If you disagreed with Liz Truss and well, crazy free market fundamentalist libertarian worldview, then you were part of the anti-growth coalition, which pretty much encompassed almost all of the United Kingdom at that point, and many businesses, even people within our own party, who were like, "What on earth is she announcing in this mini budget?" And like we've always said, this whole idea that libertarianism, even in our sort of conservative party here in the UK, is not popular. Now, it does have somewhat some popularity, not the overwhelming, of course, popularity in the US, which is why we have seen Liz Truss say, when she went out and said, "I didn't do anything wrong. I was right. You'll all see it. I'll show you." Which has led many people to think that she intends, if there ever is another leadership contest, will try to sort of come back in quite a big style. And this speech that she's doing for the Heritage Foundation, which is a big libertarian, free market, fundamentalist think tank in America, which of course is giving her a lot of dark money, and be able to sort of mount somewhat potentially of a comeback, should be quite concerning. Very, very concerning indeed. The fact that such a very infamous dark money group from the US is now trying to influence her, well, take on her sort of brand in politics, and sort of backing her to, well, once again become somewhat of a political force. Whether she will ever actually re-achieve this is very doubtful, because Liz Truss is still incredibly toxic. Everyone is very well aware of what happened and what she did. And I don't think she will ever be allowed anywhere near the levers of power ever again. But I expect her to be the figure, almost a figurehead for this movement, pretty much for the rest of her life, and be paid ridiculous sums of money to do these similar speeches pretty much for the rest of her life. So let's go find out what she is going to be saying, because again, she's having a go at the anti-growth coalition, claiming that the West's high tax rate is actually helping China and Russia. But why is it that if we charge people a higher rate of tax, how does this help China and Russia? What? Anyway, let's go see if we can find out and do a little bit of Truss deciphering and find out what on earth crazy nonsense she's spouting now. But before we do go into that, like I say, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a off-donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. I do know how I have a Substack as well, but I'm most using it more as a bit of promotion material, just to sort of get myself out there. So you can find me at Bowler Hat Man on Substack. But like I say, if you're already subscribed to my YouTube channel, you will probably see all my content. Like I say, it's just somewhere else to help distribute my content and sort of get more viewers in. That's why that exists now. But as always, like I say, let's go find out what she's got to say. So this comes from The Independent with the title of "Liz Truss Claims the West's High Tax Cartel of Complacency is Helping China and Russia." Let's find out, because this could be interesting. So Liz Truss is renewing her controversial push for a radical low tax agenda. Remember, this is the exact same agenda which almost crashed the UK pensions industry, and from what we knew was hours away of doing so, unless the Bank of England had actually stepped in there could have been an absolute almighty economic disaster of just unknown proportions. So yeah, that I think whenever you're talking about Liz Truss when she's pushing for this, I think that should be mentioned almost the direct sentence after, just to remind people of what she did trying to push that. In fact, anyone who tries to push that should be reminded of Liz Truss's grand experiment. And yeah, uh, you don't sort of experiment with an economy in that way, especially when it seemed everyone else around her was telling her, if you do this, there might be some severe consequences. And of course, she went ahead with it. And of course, well, she almost crashed the entire UK pensions industry. So, Britain's shortest serving Prime Minister, again, something else that be also mentioned as well when you talk about Liz Truss, who lasted just 6 weeks. I think she would have lasted even shorter had the Queen not died. At number 10 is urging the UK and the US to better promote free markets in the face of threat from authoritarian regimes. Again, bear in mind that we have heavily sanctioned Russia. It no longer has access to these free markets. So, how can calling for a low tax agenda be, or at least making sure that we tax these people properly at a higher rate? How is this helping China and Russia? I, like, I can't be the only one thinking we aren't missing anything here, are we? So, in a speech to the right-wing think tank, the Heritage Foundation in the US on Wednesday, the former Tory MP will claim that a, quote, cartel of complacency is damaging economic growth. Again, the anti-growth coalition. You don't understand if you're not following this low tax agenda, then that's just a cartel of complacency. Again, we saw what happened when she tried to do this. This is why you don't see any other government rushing to do something very simple. So she was accusing these Western governments of aiding China and Russia and other authoritarian regimes by refusing to offer tax cuts. Again, how does refusing to offer tax cuts help Russia? I don't understand. How? What? Mistrust will use the group's annual Margaret Thatcher lecture to claim that the 1980s Anglo-American economic model of increased privatization and smaller government is being strangled into stagnation. Well, no one wants small government. No one wants small government. Governments have to fulfill certain functions. If you want a small government, then Liz Truss should actually stand up and say what it is she no longer wants the UK government to actually do. Because if you want a small government, that is basically saying the UK government should no longer perform certain functions. Liz Truss and many of these other people who call for a small government are cowards by not saying what they mean. Because they really mean, well, we want to privatize the NHS because that's a big government thing. We don't think they should do that anymore. Oh, all these regulatory bodies, well, we shouldn't do these anymore either. This is what they're really talking about, but that's the quiet part, and they don't want to say that part out loud. So she is to say, quote, the sad truth is we have seen stagnation, redistribution, and woke culture taking hold in business and the economy in the UK and US. It results in more tax, more subsidies, and more regulation. Again, regulation's not a bad thing, but this is what people like Truss and these other people who push this nonsense want to get in the idea. And that, more tax, more subsidies, more regulation. Yeah, they can. Sometimes subsidies can be a bad thing. Like, why are you subsidizing an industry that is already really successful? Again, the oil industry in America, highly subsidized still. But those subsidies come back from a time when the oil industry in America was still struggling to try and grow. Doesn't really need those subsidies anymore. But subsidizing other businesses or other areas or stuff like that can be a good thing because it can help stimulate economic growth. But of course, people like Truss do not want to do that because they are massively small government. And as we've said before, if you want this small government nonsense or this mindset, then you have to be prepared to say what it is the government should no longer do. So the former PM is expected to suggest that this agenda has given succor to authoritarian regimes in the last leg of her attempted comeback to the political limelight. Again, how has it helped them? She hasn't actually laid this out how it's helped them. So Ms. Truss is also expected to take aim at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the ODEC, as she lashes out at the, quote, cartel of complacency, advocating that high taxes to bring down inflation. Not content with high taxes in their own countries, we now see governments seeking to agree high taxes around the free world. I'm talking about the ODEC minimum tax target, which will stop countries lowering things like corporation tax and becoming more competitive, she's expected to say. Again, tax doesn't really make companies more or less competitive. Of course, the idea of a minimum corporation tax, I think that's quite acceptable. I think Biden has said that it should be, I think, 15% at a minimum. That's not a bad idea, to be honest, because then a lot of countries, well, they will then get a lot of money in through that corporation tax. So, Ms. Truss originally beat Mr. Sunak last summer in last summer's Tory leadership contest, running on a tax-cutting agenda before her disastrous economic plans saw her booted by her own party, handing her rival the keys to number 10. Keen to try and restore her credibility, she is due to urge the right-wing conservatives around the globe to try and mount a fight back for freedom and get real about the threat from authoritarian regimes and their unwilling allies in the anti-growth movement. Again, how does having a high tax rate benefit Russia? I would say these sanctions that we're putting onto them are far more effective than taxing our companies a higher rate of tax. Again, this is just sheer madness, but there you go. So Ms. Truss is expected to say that it was the Anglo-American individualism that made the world prosperous. Low taxes, limited government, and private enterprise were what won the Cold War. Again, I think citation desperately needed. Just low taxes was certainly not a feature a lot during the Cold War, because how then did America pay for its massive military budget that helped it to win the Cold War? Because again, the Soviet Union had to compete with its own massive military budget, a budget that it could not sustain, which led to partly to its collapse. So we are now seeing this model of stagnation, strangled into stagnation. And we have to ask ourselves: are we still fit? Are we still match fit to take on China and to take on the whole concept of state capitalism? Again, what's wrong with state capitalism? Because you've got the state saying, well, right, we're going to invest in certain things or do certain things. Your own opponent used state capitalism during the pandemic to a lot of very satisfied people. You know, Rishi Sunak won himself a lot of applause, but of course, from people like, you know, Liz Truss and anyone else who shares her mindset, this was, oh, Rishi Sunak's just showing that, you know, socialism works. And of course, in an attack on so-called woke politics, this is ridiculous, but again, direction she wants to go, but have at it. We have allowed our opponents to own our institutions, to crowd our campuses and fill our airwaves. Not long ago, the United States and the United Kingdoms were absolute bastions of free enterprise, free markets, and free speech. I would pretty much say we still have pretty much free markets and free enterprise, and we still are very, very much a free speech country. But we just know now that there is less tolerance for people being sort of, openly racist or openly bigoted. I don't see that really as a bad thing. I see that as a positive for society, where we're saying people who sort of spew that stuff are taken to task for what they've said. But hey, there you go. But what we've seen now is this self-flagellation, lashing out at the very things that made us great. Again, what's this thing about high taxes helping Russia? What? Again, how? I'm confused. I must be missing something here, but yeah. In this speech, she will accuse Western leaders of meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping as a display of weakness. It comes days after French President Emmanuel Macron and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen went to meet with the Chinese leader in a show of European unity over the Ukraine war. Again, what they did was pretty good, and it's a show of unity, saying Europe backs Ukraine. And one of the ways we know that can certainly help bring this to a war if China starts putting pressure on Russia to end this war. We know that every single foreign policy expert out there has said the same thing. If we want to help end this war quicker, we've got to get China to start putting pressure on Russia to end this war. So Putin and Xi have made it clear that they're allies against the West and against Western capitalism, she will say. Putin is absolutely not against capitalism. Like I say, Putin runs an oligarchy, which is the very sort of peak pinnacle sort of success for capitalism. So that is why Western leaders visiting President Xi to ask for his support in ending the war is a mistake. It is a sign of weakness, Miss Truss is expected to say. It is not a sign of weakness at all. It is a sensible thing to do. Macron and Ursula going over to Xi and saying, "Hey, put pressure on Putin to end this war," is basic diplomacy 101. But again, Liz Truss is not an expert in foreign policy. Like I say, she didn't really do a good job at foreign policy herself when she was minister for all this. Ms. Truss has been expected to officially redesignate China as a threat in an official speak instead of a systemic competitor during her leadership, while Mr. Sunak has described the nation as a systemic challenge rather than a threat. And yeah, unfortunately, this is Liz Truss desperately trying to make a comeback. I think it's no surprise that you're seeing people like the Heritage Foundation. I wouldn't be surprised if there are other sort of big pro libertarian conservative groups who go, I wonder if we could get Liz Truss in power again and actually go through with these crazy libertarian reforms, then we could show everyone that actually all this libertarian nonsense works, rather than it has been shown time and time again on big and small scales that this libertarian free market fundamentalist nonsense is just that complete and utter nonsense. Now, I don't think Liz Truss is ever going to be allowed anywhere near the levers of power ever again, because she managed to pull herself up by the greasy pole by saying the right things, but when it came to actual competency, many times during her time as trade secretary, basically giving everything Australia wanted in a trade deal, to a point where the Australian negotiators said themselves they were so shocked that the UK was giving up so much for so little in return. Something that, again, Brexiteers would complain about in our trade deals with the EU. But for some reason, again, when it's done with Australia, oh well, that's just fine. So yeah, expect probably to see Liz Truss trying maybe in a very vain attempt to come back into the Conservative Party, but she will have a lot. I highly suspect big money backing, certainly from things like the Heritage Foundation, trying to sort of appeal to this. But whether she will succeed, I don't think so. I do not think so. Liz Truss, having the reputation that she does of Britain's shortest serving prime minister, trying to perform an economic experiment with the UK's economy, which ended in disaster, almost crashing the UK pension industry, which would have had vast other economic consequences for the rest of our economy. Liz Truss should never, ever be allowed anywhere near the levers of power ever again. And if anyone ever thinks that maybe putting Liz Truss in power again is a good idea, well, they've either A, started drinking the same Kool-Aid Liz Truss has been drinking, or, well, who knows? Who knows? But hey, there you go. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. As always, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.